So now talk about the rationale of the elders' decision to suspend our regular church services. I mean, you must have considered, what about Hebrews 10:25? Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Or Acts 5:29, we must obey God rather than men.
Right.
I was there, so I know we discussed those verses. Talk about that.
Well, first of all, the clear demand of Scripture is to be subject to the powers that be because they're ordained of God.
Romans 13.
Romans 13. And 1 Peter talks about the same thing: honor the king and those who are in authority over you. God has set them in that authority. The Apostle Paul tells Timothy that we're to be good citizens, that we're to live a quiet and peaceable life. We aren't rebels. We don't start protests. We don't defy the government. We conform. We're submissive to the government as basically ordained by God. So that was an easy call for us. What would have made a difference would have been if this was persecution of the church. If all of a sudden the government decided to shut down churches as an act of persecution against churches, we would defy that, because now you're into Acts 5, where Peter actually says, do we obey God or men? You say we don't meet. God says we do. We must meet. You say don't preach the gospel. We say we must preach the gospel. So when the government gets to the point where it basically persecutes the church has to take that persecution and still do what God has commanded the church to do. The other thing that we talked about with the elders was, if we defy this, and if we say we're going to meet anyway, we run the risk of exposing people to this illness needlessly. And why would we want to do that? Because this is a health issue. This is a health crisis. And since, like any church, many of the people in our church are older, we wouldn't want to expose them to that. We've only had, as far as I know, and this was up to yesterday, we've only had one couple in our church in the Spanish ministry who actually got the coronavirus. But that couple, and not an older couple either, wound up in the hospital because it was such a virulent experience for them. So we wouldn't want to say, well, let them come to church and mingle with everybody else, and let it be whatever is going to be is going to be. That doesn't make sense. We wouldn't purposely expose our people. That's not caring for your people. We wouldn't purposely expose them to that. And since we wouldn't have known, we just said, look, we're not going to do that.